Chapter 1. Down the Rabbit Hole. Alice and her big sister sat under a tree one sunny day. Alice's sister had a book, but Alice had nothing with her. She looked at her sister's book. There were no pictures or conversations in it. "Why is she reading a book without pictures or conversations?" she thought. "I'm bored. I know. I'll look for some flowers." Then she thought, "No, it's too hot for that, and I feel sleepy." Suddenly, a white rabbit ran past her. It took a watch from its jacket and looked at it. "Oh, I'm going to be late," it said. "That's strange. A rabbit with a watch," said Alice. She jumped up and ran after the animal. It ran down a large rabbit hole, so Alice went down the hole too. She didn't stop and ask, "How am I going to get out again?" Alice fell down and down, but she fell very slowly and didn't feel afraid. What's going to happen next? She wondered. She looked round. There were cupboards in the walls of the rabbit hole. Some of the cupboards were open, and there were books in them. Sometimes she saw pictures. She looked down, but she couldn't see any light. Down, down, down. When will the hole end? She wondered. Perhaps I'm going to come out in Australia. I'll have to ask the name of the country. "Please, madam, is this Australia or New Zealand?" "No, I can't do that. They'll think I'm stupid." She thought about her cat, Dinah. What's Dinah doing? Will they remember her milk tonight? Oh, Dinah, why aren't you here with me? Perhaps there's a mouse here, and you can eat it. Suddenly, Alice was at the bottom of the hole. "That didn't hurt," she said, and sat up quickly. She could see the white rabbit, and she ran after him again. They were in a different rabbit hole now. "Oh, my ears and nose!" the white rabbit cried. "It's getting very late." He ran faster and vanished through another hole. Alice followed him through the hole. Now she was in a very long room. She looked round for the white rabbit, but she couldn't see him anywhere. Chapter 2. Alice's Tears. "Oh, what's happening?" cried Alice. "I'm getting taller and taller." She looked down. "Goodbye, feet. Who will put your shoes on for you now? I can't do it. I'll give you some new shoes for Christmas. I'll have to send them to you." In a short time, Alice was more than 3 meters high. "I want to go into that garden," she thought. She took the little key from the table. Then she went to the door and opened it. But she was too big and couldn't go through it. She sat down and began to cry again. Because she was very big, her tears were very big too. "Alice, stop it this minute. Don't cry," she said. But she couldn't stop the big tears, and after a time there was water everywhere. She heard the sound of small feet. She looked down, and there was the white rabbit again. He had his best clothes on, and in one hand he had a white hat. "Oh, the Duchess, the Duchess," he said. "She'll be angry with me because I'm late." Alice wanted to ask him for help. "Please, sir," she said very politely. The White Rabbit jumped. He ran out of the room, and his hat fell from his hands. Alice took the hat. "Am I different?" she wondered. "I was Alice yesterday, but everything is different today. Perhaps I'm not me now. So who am I? That's the question." She began to think about her friends. "Perhaps I'm one of them," she thought. "I'm not Ada, because her hair is different to mine. I don't want to be my friend Mabel, because she doesn't know very much. I know more than she does." Then she thought, "Do I know more? Let me see. What's 4 and 4? 8. 8 and 8 is 16. 16 and 16 is... Oh, I can't remember." And she started to cry again. But this time her tears were small tears. She was small again. Why? She wondered. Then she understood. She had the White Rabbit's hat in her hand. "I'm smaller because I've got the hat in my hand," she thought. She put the hat on. It was the right size for her head. Chapter 3. A Race. Alice and the birds and animals felt cold and wet. The largest bird spoke to Alice. "Good afternoon," it said loudly. "I am the dodo." What is a dodo? Thought Alice, but she smiled politely. "Hello, Dodo. I'm Alice," she said. "I have an idea," said the dodo. "We all want to get warm, so let's have a race, a caucus race." "What is a caucus race?" Alice asked. "I can tell you," said the dodo, "but I won't. I'll show you. That will be easier." He put the animals and birds in different places in the room. In a race, somebody usually says, 1, 2, 3, go! But the dodo didn't do that. Everybody started to run at different times and stopped at different times too. After half an hour, the dodo cried, "Everybody stop!" All the birds and animals stopped. Then they all came to the dodo and stood round it. "Who was first? Who was first?" they shouted. The dodo had to think about it. He sat for a long time with his finger in his mouth. Then he said, "Everybody was first, so everybody can have a chocolate." "But who will give us the chocolates?" the mouse asked. "She will," the dodo said, and looked at Alice. The birds and animals came and stood round Alice. "Chocolates! Chocolates!" they cried. "What am I going to do?" thought Alice. "I haven't got any chocolates." But then she saw a box of chocolates near her feet. "Here we are," she said, and opened the box. There was one chocolate for each bird and animal. "But Alice has to have something, you know," said the mouse. "Of course," the dodo answered. He turned to Alice. "What can you have?" he asked. "I can have the box," said Alice sadly. "Give it to me," said the dodo, and Alice gave it to him. Chapter 4. The White Rabbit's House. It was not the mouse. It was the White Rabbit. He came slowly into the room. "Oh, my ears and nose," he said quietly. "The Duchess! The Duchess! She'll be angry. They'll cut off my head, I know. Oh, where is it? Where did it fall?" "He's looking for his hat," thought Alice. She wanted to help him, but she couldn't see the hat anywhere. She looked round. Everything was different now. She wasn't in the long room any more, and there was no table or water. She was outside again, in the country. The White Rabbit saw her. "What are you doing out here, Mary Ann?" he asked angrily. "Run home this minute and bring me a hat. Quick now!" Alice didn't say, "I'm not Mary Ann." She felt too afraid. She ran fast, and after a short time she came to a pretty little house. Above the door were the words, W. Rabbit. She went in and ran up the stairs. "This is very strange," she thought. "I hope I don't meet Mary Ann. Why am I bringing a rabbit his hat? Perhaps when I get home I'll do things for Dinah. Perhaps I'll watch mouse holes for her." She went into a small room. There, on a table, was a hat and a little bottle. Alice took the hat and looked at the bottle. It didn't have the words, "Drink me," on it, but she drank from it. "I know something interesting will happen," she thought. "When I eat or drink something here, it always does. I hope I get bigger this time. I don't like being small." She drank half the bottle. "Oh, I'm getting much taller," she cried. "Oh!" Her head hit the top of the house, and she put the bottle down quickly. "Oh no," she thought. "I hope I don't get taller." She sat down. Chapter 5. The Caterpillar. The caterpillar looked at Alice for some time before it spoke. Then it said slowly, "Who are you?" It was a difficult question. I don't really know, sir," Alice said. "I was Alice when I got up this morning, but then I changed, and then I changed again, and again." "What do you mean?" the caterpillar asked. "I don't know," Alice answered. "You see, I'm not me now." "I don't understand," said the caterpillar. "I'll try and tell you," said Alice. "You see, I change all the time. It's very difficult for me." "Why? I can change very easily." "Well, perhaps it's not difficult for you, but it is for me," said Alice. "For you? Who are you?" said the caterpillar, and laughed. Alice felt angry. It asked me that question before, she thought. She stood very tall and said, "I will tell you, but first you tell me. Who are you?" "Why do I have to tell you?" asked the caterpillar. This was another difficult question, and Alice could not answer it. "This caterpillar isn't very friendly," she thought. So she walked away. "Come back!" the caterpillar called. I want to tell you something important." Alice turned and came back again. "Don't get angry," said the caterpillar. "Is that all?" Alice asked. She felt very angry with the caterpillar. "No," said the caterpillar. It did not speak for some minutes. Then it said, "So you're different, are you?" "Yes, I am, sir," said Alice. "I can't remember things, and my size changes all the time. Sometimes I get bigger, and then I get smaller again." Chapter 6. The Duchess and the Cheshire Cat. Inside, a large, ugly woman sat with a baby in her arms. There was a cook by the fire, and there was food on the table. Near the fire, there was a large cat with a big smile. This smile went from ear to ear on its face. "I think that woman is the Duchess," thought Alice. "Can girls speak to duchesses?" she wondered. But the Duchess did not say anything to her, so Alice asked, "Please, why is your cat smiling?" "Because it's a Cheshire cat, that's why," said the Duchess. "So Cheshire cats can smile? I didn't know that," said Alice. "You don't know much," said the Duchess. "That's not very polite," thought Alice. She started to say something. Suddenly, the cook threw a plate at the Duchess. The Duchess didn't move. The cook threw more things: plates, cups, spoons. Some of them hit the Duchess and the baby. The Duchess did nothing, but the baby started to cry. "Oh, don't throw things at the baby," cried Alice. "You'll hit its pretty nose." "You be quiet! It isn't your baby!" the Duchess shouted. She began to sing to it. These were the words of the song. "Be angry with your little boy, and hit him when he cries. He has to know that he's a child. He's really not your size." The cook sang the song too. When they finished, they sang it again. The Duchess started to throw the baby up and down. At the end of the song, she threw the baby to Alice. "Here, you can have it now," she said. "I have to get ready. I'm going to see the Queen." The cook threw another plate at the Duchess. It didn't hit her, but she left the room quickly. Chapter 7. A Tea Party. There was a tree in front of the house. Under the tree was a big table with a lot of chairs round it. But there were only 3 at the table: the Mad Hatter, the March Hare, and a large brown mouse. The mouse sat between the Mad Hatter and the March Hare. It was asleep, so they talked over its head. When they saw Alice, they cried, "No, no, you can't sit here. There isn't a place for you." "There are a lot of places," Alice said. She sat down in a chair at one end of the table. "Have some wine," the Mad Hatter said politely. Alice looked round the table, but there was only tea. "I don't see any wine," she answered. "There isn't any," said the March Hare. "Then why did you say, 'Have some wine'? It wasn't very polite of you," Alice said angrily. "We didn't invite you to tea," but you came." "That wasn't very polite of you," said the March Hare. "No, it wasn't. Cut your hair," said the Mad Hatter. "Oh, be quiet," said Alice. The Mad Hatter opened his eyes very wide, but he said nothing. Then he took out his watch and looked at it. "What day is it?" he asked. Alice thought for a little. "Wednesday, I think," she said. "My watch says Monday," the Mad Hatter said. "You see, I was right. Butter isn't good for a watch." He looked angrily at the March Hare. "But it was the best batter," answered the March Hare. "Yes, but you put it in with the bread knife. Perhaps some bread got in." The March Hare took the watch from the Mad Hatter and looked at it sadly. Then he put it in his tea. He took it out and looked at it again. "It was the best batter, you know," he repeated. Alice looked at the watch. "It's a strange watch," she said. "It tells you the day, but it doesn't tell you the time." "So, does your watch tell you the year?" asked the Mad Hatter. "No," Alice answered, "but it's the same year for a very long time." "And my watch doesn't tell the time because it's always tea time." Chapter 8. Inside the Garden. Near Alice was a small tree with flowers on it. There were 3 gardeners by the tree. "Be careful, Five," one of them said. "I'm always careful, Seven," answered Five. Alice went to them. "What are you doing?" she asked. "We're making the flowers red," one of the gardeners said. "That's strange," thought Alice. "Why?" she asked. The 3 men looked unhappy. "You tell her, Seven," Five said. "No," said Seven. "You tell her too." "Well, miss, the Queen wanted trees with red flowers on them, but this tree's got white flowers. We don't want the Queen to see it. She'll be very angry and cut off our heads. So we're making the flowers red before she sees them." "Oh no!" Five shouted suddenly. "The Queen! The Queen!" The 3 gardeners fell to the ground, with their faces down. Alice heard the sound of many feet and turned round. "Oh, good," she thought. "Now I'll see the Queen." First, 10 men with clubs in their hands came into the garden. Next came the King's men. There were 10 of them, and they had red diamonds on their clothes. The children of the King and Queen came next, all with red hearts. After them, there were a lot more people. Most of them were kings and queens. The White Rabbit was there, but he didn't see Alice. The Knave of Hearts came next. Last of all were the King and Queen of Hearts. When these people saw Alice, they all stopped. The Queen said to the Knave of Hearts, "Who is this?" The Knave of Hearts didn't know, so he smiled and said nothing. "Stupid man!" shouted the Queen. She turned to Alice and said, "What's your name, child?" "My name is Alice, madam," Alice answered. She didn't feel very afraid of the Queen, They're only cards, she thought. Chapter 9. Who Took the Tarts? Alice and the Duchess followed everybody into a house with one very large room. The King and Queen were there. They sat on big chairs above all the animals and birds. All the cards were there too. Near the King was the White Rabbit. He had a paper in his hand and looked very important. The Knave of Hearts stood in front of the King and Queen. He stood between two men, and his head was down. It was his trial. In the middle of the room was a table with a large plate of tarts on it. Alice found a place and sat down. She looked round. I know a lot of the animals and birds here, she thought. She looked hungrily at the tarts. I hope they finish the trial quickly, she thought. Then we can eat the tarts. Suddenly, the White Rabbit cried, Quiet, please! The King looked round the room. Read the paper, he said. The White Rabbit stood up and read from a very long paper. The Queen of Hearts, she made some tarts one lovely sunny day. The Knave of Hearts, he took those tarts, he took them all away. Cut off his head, cried the Queen. No, no, said the Rabbit. We have to call people into the room and ask them questions. All right, then. Call the Mad Hatter, said the King. The Mad Hatter came into the room. He had a teacup in one hand and some bread and butter in the other hand. Why did you call me? I wanted to finish my tea, he said. When did you begin your tea? Asked the King. The Mad Hatter thought for a minute. The March Hare and the Mouse were quite near him, and he looked at them for ideas. Then he said, March the 14th, I think. 15th, said the March Hare. 16th, said the Mouse. Write that down, said the King to the White Rabbit. Then he said to the Mad Hatter, Take off your hat. It isn't mine, said the Mad Hatter. Oh, so you took it from somebody, you bad man, said the King. No, I sell hats. I'm a hatter, answered the Mad Hatter. He looked very afraid. Don't be afraid, or I'll cut off your head, said the King. I'm not a bad man, the Mad Hatter cried. But the March Hare told me. I didn't, the March Hare said quickly. Well, the Mouse said. The Mad Hatter stopped and looked at the Mouse. But the Mouse didn't say anything, because he was asleep. Chapter 10. The End of the Trial. Here, cried Alice, and stood up quickly. But she was tall now, and chairs, tables, and people fell here, there, and everywhere. Put everything and everybody back, said the King loudly. Alice put them all back in their places. Then the King asked, What do you know about these tarts? Nothing, answered Alice. That's very important, said the King. You mean unimportant, sir, said the White Rabbit.
"Unimportant, of course," said the King. "Important, unimportant, important, unimportant," he repeated.
He looked at Alice carefully. He took a book and read from it.
"Alice is more than a kilometre high, so she has to leave the room," he said.
"I'm not more than a kilometre high," Alice began.
"You are,"
said the King. "More than 2 kilometres high," said the Queen. "Well, I'm not leaving this room," said Alice. The King's face went white. "Cut off her head!" shouted the Queen. Nobody moved. "You stupid woman," said Alice. She was very large now, and she wasn't afraid of anybody. "Cut off her head!" shouted the Queen. "Don't be stupid," Alice said. "Who's afraid of you? I'm not. You're only cards." The cards, all 52 of them, came down on top of Alice. She felt afraid and angry and started to fight them. Then she opened her eyes. She saw a tree, a big old tree. She was under it, next to her sister. Her sister's hand was on her hair. "Wake up, Alice dear," her sister said. "You slept for a long time." "Oh," said Alice, and then she understood. She sat up and told her sister about the White Rabbit and the rabbit hole. When she finished her story, her sister laughed. "Let's go home to tea," she said. "It's getting late." "Oh, yes, I'd like some tea," cried Alice, and she got up and ran home.